field, if you will. So looking forward to the next 30 minutes with you all. You might be wondering, what is Corteva, or who is this Corteva? We went through a merger a couple years ago, and it was Pioneer, DuPont, as well as Dow. All three of those big companies came together, not just the ag side, but material science, everything, with the intent to split. And the idea behind that was we wanted to be an ag company solely making decisions for what our customers need in agriculture. So we wouldn't have to justify to a board of plastics or material science folks why we need a new kochia product or why we need a new annual grasses product. So you have the first and only pure play ag company that is USA, America owned. We live, breathe agriculture every day. And we are the only other ag company that actually does research specifically for range and pasture and land management. So a lot of times you'll see actives like Rick was talking about will come over from like the tree nuts and vines, or it's very common for wheat herbicides to come over into range and pasture. We do look at those actives as well. But we are researching and looking for things that you all need. And a lot of that we get from the field. So I love hearing from you all what you need and what we need to be working on. I'm not saying it's something that's going to happen overnight. You all know the process can be pretty daunting, but it is a focus for us. Our purpose: to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come. This just really hits home for me. I am so proud to have grown up in agriculture. I love that way of life, and to be able to work and live and breathe in it, and really be an advocate for you all. We just had our national sales meeting last week, and we do have a lot of opportunity to talk with our management about what we need, and even up to the global level. These folks are looking for things that we need, not just in the US, but in Australia, in South America. So I am so proud to be that advocate for you all. So kind of digging into the weeds now, if you will, of why we've got these issues in rangeland and why they seem to be so difficult to control. You know, when we look at like corn and soybeans, we're trying to grow one crop and that's all we want there. And that's really not the case with rangeland or range and pasture, right? Even if we're looking at a like an improved pasture, it's very rare that we've got just one type and kind of grass out there. We've got a lot of diversity. And although we talk about diversity being a good thing, right? There are some instances where diversity is not great when we've got a diversity of weeds. Like you look at that top middle picture, and on the one side, you can see that salt cedar was sprayed as a foliar treatment. And on the other side, we've still got salt cedar and cheatgrass. That's a multiple treatment, multiple pass process. It's not just a one and done. And that's really something that I think is difficult for me too, to keep in my head. Like I'm an instant gratification. I want to spray that weed. I want to see it dying and, you know, really feel like I'm making progress. Right. But I'm going to share with you, I've had the privilege of having a couple interns the past couple years. And, in this market, we realize that we don't always know what our customers are thinking or what kind of expectations they have when they're making an application. And so my intern 2 summers ago was able to do quite a few surveys around not only my territory, but also up into Montana and Idaho, just really digging into what makes controlling weeds so difficult. And we're going to revisit these also later on in the presentation. So one of those that I alluded at was people don't think about their pastures like a crop. They look at their piece of land like it's just something I've got. Do they really look at it as a resource? Some do, for sure. I'm not trying to bucket everybody there. But we don't really look at it all the time as something that we're trying to get a return on our investment. Another big one is competition versus residual. There was a situation with an applicator, I'm so glad they shared this with us, where it's really difficult to explain to a landowner sometimes that you really want desirable competition out there, like desirable grasses, or if there's a brush component that you want to keep out there. Your best defense against weeds is a healthy population of native grasses and forbs. And that's sometimes really difficult to explain or get across. Another one is we look at the historic Dow portfolio, Tordon being one of them, has got a pretty long soil half-life. And when we're looking at bare ground situations, we think like more residual, better, really good. Well, one of the things we don't think about in rangeland is the pressure that that may put on an applicator to make a perfect application every time. If you're relying on a long residual product in rangeland where there could be factors outside of the product itself. For example, we talk about having brush and other species out there. If you've got a shadow effect, it doesn't matter how great your herbicide is. If it doesn't get to where you need it to go, you're going to have skips, you're going to have misses. So thinking about, okay, am I prepared to go back here? And do I really want to tell my customer that this is going to be 100% control? Very, very leery of that. Pre-germination herbicides have been something that I've heard more and more of the longer I've been out here. But it's really difficult to gauge every year. How do we know what true pre-germination is? Where is that timing? And then lastly, we've had, especially when we're talking grass and grass, we've had a lot of guys asking about foxtail. How do I get foxtail out? And one of the things that CSU has talked about to be careful of, when I've heard Dr. Scott Nissen speak on this, you can transition your site to a completely warm season population. So these are just all things to think about as we look at this dynamic of controlling weeds in rangeland. I am excited to talk to y'all about a new active that we have in rangeland that's hopefully going to address some of these issues. That active's name is Rinskor. So I'm first going to talk about this active, getting more into the science behind it, and then we're going to talk about what we've seen from it from a product standpoint. It is part of the arylpicolinate chemistry. We have released this chemistry in crops. It is a really unique chemistry because it binds to the plant in a completely different way than any other group 4 growth regulator. We're going to talk about what that means to you as an applicator here shortly. So you can see Rick earlier talked about, the milestones, the vistas, all of those would be represented in this chemical slide. And then you've also got the arylpicolinates that are there also. So they are group 4s, but Rinskor behaves differently because of its binding site to the plant, which is really important. When we look at active use rates, so how much active product are we actually putting out on the ground? The equivalent of a max use rate of Rinskor is about 7 paper clips. So it's an active compound at very, very low use rate, but it is also a very environmentally favorable profile. We have no grazing restrictions for any class of livestock. It's been awarded the Green Chemistry Award due to its low toxicity for mammals as well as fish. It does have some soil activity, but it does not have soil residual from what we are seeing. However, when we mix it with Milestone, the product that Rick also had up on his screen is Duracor. So Duracor is a premix of both Milestone and Rinskor. And what Rinsecore brings to Milestone is everything that Milestone can do, DuraCore can do better. So we are still using DuraCore in those same places that we've been able to use Milestone, including use up to water's edge, as long as you are minimizing overspray. This is an SC formulation, but it is a very, very easily mixable formulation. So if you like to mix 2,4-D or Escort or Telar, I'm going to get into some of my favorite mixes here in a minute. But we are seeing no mixing issues with this product, which is fantastic. It is the broadest spectrum range and pasture label that is on the market today, with over 140 weeds, including better activity on some of the tough to control species. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. I was so impressed, y'all, this summer when I went out and sprayed this on some leafy spurge around Devil's Tower. There is really little to no odor to this product, especially when you're mixing it with our 2,4-D choline Freelex. So if public perception is something that you all run into in your part of the world, DuraCore may be a good option for you to look at. And the last point on there is probably the most important, because in rangeland, it's not always what you take, it's what you leave behind. This product is extremely safe on grasses. We did a few studies in Sheridan County, Wyoming, looking at what happens when you overlap a spot treatment rate. So we're talking 4X labeled rates. No damage to Idaho fescue even 1 year after, and they're in a really dry year, you guys. So really exciting to see that even if you do have some overlap, even on a spot treatment rate, that you are going to be safe to your grasses. So getting into some more of the species that you're going to see better activity out of DuraCore than you would have from Milestone. It is the kiss of death to the carrot family. So poison hemlock, it is completely lights out on. Ironweed species, even late season, this is where DuraCore really shines. If you are going after late season curly dock, 95% plus control. I have really been amazed at what this product does, even when we get into the hot, later season times of year. Of course, if we can get in good growing conditions, great, but you all know we've got a short growing season here, especially compared to, you go a little bit farther east, even into Nebraska, where I grew up, and you've just got a lot longer time frame that you can spray weeds. So having some additional protection with DuraCore in the tank, if you get a little bit late, DuraCore is still going to pick up. Another interesting thing that we were not expecting with DuraCore is that we are seeing increased activity on brush. Scotch broom control with DuraCore by itself is 85% control. When you mix with Vaseline, which is a triclopyr choline, we're seeing really, really good things here. And I'm going to talk about some other brush treatments later today when we talk about rights of way. Okay, so my favorite go-to mix from this summer has been 20 ounces of DuraCore plus a ½ ounce of Escort. I've even had some guys add 2,4-D to this mix just because they want to go out and they want to pick up as much as possible. I've got applicators that say, you know what, Claire, if I leave one weed out there, that's the weed that my customer is going to go, well, why didn't you pick up this while you were out there? Even if we're just going after, thistles or knapweed. So feel free to throw in another active there if you want. 20 ounces of DuraCore is going to get you 7 ounces of Milestone out on the ground. So you are going to see more residual with that 20 ounces of DuraCore. And, tank mixing with a product like Escort, you're going to see better activity on your mustards, and especially aerially mullein applications. We are seeing 90% plus control from the air with this mix, which is super exciting. A couple other species up there, mustards activity. Milestone by itself really doesn't do much to mustards unless you're going pre-emergent. We're seeing a little bit better mustard control here. But if that's your main target, I do recommend a 2,4-D. It just seems to bump up our efficacy there. Another species I wasn't expecting, larkspur. Go-to product there has been Tordon. I continue to hear from my applicators that Duracore, both with and without escort, is looking fantastic on larkspur. Another species that has been giving us a lot of trouble is fringed sage. And I guess the guys in southern Wyoming call it junk sage, but escort by itself and Duracore by itself didn't really do much, but the 20 ounces of Duracore plus a ½ ounce of escort, we did about 90 acres of this just to really see what we were getting. And it's looking really fantastic. Plus with this mix, you're really not missing out on anything else that might be out there. So it's just a really effective treatment if you're trying to improve that pasture. All right, so the ever popular leafy spurge. I have put out a couple different treatments with Duracore, and so far, compared to what I would consider the industry standards on leafy spurge, my mixes with Duracore are outperforming them. They're picking up the spurge quicker and faster because of that Rinsecore active, but we're also able to get into more territory. So in a non-riparian area, the 16 ounces of it's triple 16 mix. So you're looking at 16 ounces of Tordon plus 16 ounces of Duracore, 16 ounces of Freelex, which is our 2,4-D choline formulation. I was shocked at the stand when I went back out there to look at it a month later. It absolutely just smoked it. And the Tordon is going to have more soil activity. And so that's why we left Tordon in the mix. But another mix that's looking really promising, I have not seen this 1 year out. We just put it out this summer. But 20 ounces of Duracore plus a ½ ounce of escort and 8 ounces of Vision, which is Helena's dicamba product. I had a couple guys tell me that they were using different mixes with Milestone and wanted to see what Duracore would look like there. And so far, the Duracore mix is outperforming the Milestone mix. Plus, we can take this up to water's edge. We still want to be careful around our woody plant species, but we're definitely getting into some more terrain here. Okay, so going back to that idea of it's not always what you take, but what you leave behind. One of the great things that we have with Milestone and Duracore is flexibility to reseed in case we don't have those desirable species come back. So this is just an example of a weed seed, a desirable seeding restoration after a Milestone application. The Duracore label will tell you that certain species we're able to plant 14 days after application. This is not going to be inclusive of all species, so please consult me or talk to Bonnie, talk to Rick if you are talking about reseeding, but we have flexibility, folks. If you need to plant after an application, Duracore and Milestone are still going to suit those needs there. Again, not always what you take, but what you leave behind. This is a list of grasses that we extensively tested with Milestone. And keep in mind, we're not just looking at what 7 ounces of Milestone or what 20 ounces of Duracore would look like, because I know that all of you all are great applicators and never have any overlaps or never have anywhere where we may have a little bit of overspray, right? We want to be sure that you're protected just in case those things do happen. So I know that when my customers let me go out and spray with them, this gives them peace of mind in case I get a little bit, farmer hand heavy out there. A couple stewardship reminders with both DuraCore and Milestone. The best thing about DuraCore is that it does not attach to any part of the animal once it is ingested and passes through the animal. The worst part about DuraCore is that it remains active in that manure. So just remember, we can use both Milestone and DuraCore on hay that is cut and moved off farm, as long as it has the supplemental label with it, letting anyone know who purchases that hay that you do have active aminopyrrolid for the next 18 months in that product. A reminder of your replant interval there. We may be able to shorten that, but we also may lengthen that depending on what your restoration program is. We are safe under and around most trees, especially with DuraCore. We want to be sure that we're avoiding the foliage. And if you want to take a picture of any of these slides, this is can be used under trees, and these are use caution, and then do not use under. Good rule of thumb is anything that could have sucker species or any legume tree species are ones that you really want to be careful around. So that is a good rule of thumb. And if you're questioning or not quite sure, always ask. One of the best learning experiences I had was when I had first started, and one of my applicators was spraying Milestone on black henbane, and it was a really kind of like weird, non-really inhabited area, but he had just sprayed on some of these really small legume species trees. And he noticed that he was starting to see symptomology on some of the larger ones. A lot of times they can have interconnected root systems. And if you get enough of that product there, we can start to see symptomology on others. So that's one of the main reasons that we say you should be cautious in those situations. All right, so getting on to, no pun intended, a hot topic out there, cheatgrass or annual grasses. What do we do about these things? Well, I'm going to remind you about the same things that we struggle with in broadleaves. They get even tougher when we talk about annual grasses. When we look at controlling annual grasses in pasture, if you talk to wheat growers about controlling cheatgrass, like, we've got options, no problem. But they're also relying on competition after that PowerFlex application to really choke out that cheatgrass. If you don't have competition out there, it becomes a little bit different dynamic. Plus, you've got a much smaller area for you to get your herbicide on the plant if it's a post-emergent product, or if you've got a thick layer of thatch, or if you've got a lot of other undesirables there, it can be really tricky to make that perfect application to be sure that you're getting the most out of your application. Another thing that one of my customers in Wyoming had to remind me of is, he's like, Claire, we have never really talked about broadleaves like a one and done. He's like, maybe with Milestone in certain situations we can get like 90% plus control. But he says, I'm still going back. If it's a bad infestation, I'm still going back if we're going after thistles or knapweed, whatever it may be, because I want to be sure that they're not there. We need to have that same mentality with annual grasses, because once you have an escape, once you have another seed bank or population there, you start that process all over, okay? So it can make it very difficult. And then we've also got other weeds out there. So this picture really hits home, and I wish I was there in person because I can see the reaction on your faces. Sometimes we'll make a treatment for one thing, and then another bad thing pops up in its place. So here there was 8 ounces of plateau treatment for cheatgrass, and now we've got a fresh stand of Canada thistle. So what did we really do there? And I think that we see this probably even more in annual grasses versus broadleaf applications, because we're just kind of guessing what may be underneath that layer of annual grasses, unless it's a really, really early infestation. But the other thing too, that I didn't think about until I was out in the field with one of my aerial guys, he said, Claire, I really like going to the worst pasture that my ranchers might have, because that's where I can make the most out of their investment. If you give me a slew of weeds and I spray something like Duracor on it, man, I'm giving them a big return on their investment, because we're basically going from nothing to double or even triple the amount of grass production. So be cautious when you've got an annual grass population and you don't know what's under there. You may want to be thinking about a broadleaf component as well. So some of the research that we've done with Milestone and Duracor, we were looking at this kind of concept to see, okay, if we really want to target both broadleaves and annual grasses, when are our customers already going out for broadleaf applications? Most of the time in the spring. Plus, at that timing, we're also at a post application for annual grasses, so we can actually see what we've got out there. So these two data slides are a seed head suppression treatment. So going out in the spring, June timing, actively growing, and looking at two different phases of growth, both at boot stage and inflorescence of Ventinata and Japanese brome. So if you remember that first picture from like the third slide that I showed you all, where you had annual grasses and salt cedar. So we've actually controlled annual grasses with this type of application, multiple year treatments, not just one and done, but multiple year treatments if you really want to eradicate it. But you're going out at the same timing as your broadleaf application. So low bars is better. This is specifically Japanese brome. When you look at the germination of those seeds that we sprayed out there in the spring, little to no germination at a 7-ounce Milestone rate or a 20-ounce Duracor rate. So if you've got enough competition out there to outcompete your broadleaves and annual grasses, you may be able to improve your pasture enough just after that 1 year. Plus, it leaves that flexibility open if you do need to reseed, or if you've got another problem out there that maybe wasn't evident before, you've got a way to pivot and a way to move forward without being locked into something long-term. So here are the recommendations that we have been promoting for a total restoration solution when it comes to annual grasses, because it's never just annual grasses. You've always got broadleaves out there as well. So the most popular and most economical is going to be a fall treatment of 20 ounces of Duracor plus 5 to 7 ounces of Plateau. We've seen a lot of success with this in Montana, Wyoming. We really like this mix, one, because as I mentioned of the economics of it, but two, Plateau is an older product. It's been out for a while, but one of the comments that we got from our applicators was, hey, for 90 cents an ounce, I can figure out how to make that product work. Now, I'm not going to steal Derek's thunder here because I know he's going to talk about Rejuvra and Indaziflam. And when that product works, it looks phenomenal. But one of the things that we really saw from this mix in Wyoming was if you can take out the broadleaves with those annual grasses with 20 ounces of Duracor, I mean, this is your 5-star Cadillac treatment. 20 ounces of Duracor plus your Indaziflam flavor of choice. And then if there's some sites you can't get to this fall, or if you have some escapes after that fall treatment, if you don't catch that pre-germination with your Indaziflam treatment, you can follow up with a 20-ounce Duracor treatment in the spring, still catch your broadleaves as well as that seed head timing for annual grasses. All right, so in sum here, there are a lot of different uses for our lands out here. It's not just cattle. We've got elk, buffalo, deer. I'm excited. I get a archery hunt next week, so I'm looking forward to chasing some of those critters around. But we really want this land to be around. And if we're not paying attention to the total restoration program, that is annual grasses and broadleaves, we're really turning our backs on what moving forward and what progress is. We want this stuff to be here. So I will close with that. Who has a comment or a question or just wants to say hello? I think I've got a couple minutes.
Hang on, let me go take you back here, Claire. I'm walking. You have a question? Okay, well, at least I back here.
Hi, Claire.
Hi.
Anybody else want to say hi or have a question? Any Bueller? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. All right, I'll see y'all in another hour.
Sounds good.